Let me get my screen shared here and get into presentation mode. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes.
All right, what's an audiophile? I don't know if anybody's ever heard that term before. I would consider myself one. I have several close friends who would consider themselves audiophiles. Um, I generally consider an audiophile to be someone who's just as into a stereo system as the music itself. So, what makes great sound? Like a lot of things, I think it depends on who you are and what you're looking for. I'm not really one for boomy, car shaking audio. I respect it. I think it's fun and interesting, but not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that sounds a little bit more like live music or music as it was recorded in a studio. As such, over the years, I've gone out and seen lots and lots of live music, and I find something interesting that a lot of my friends who consider themselves audiophiles almost never go out and see live music. I just find that to be odd. My early days of stereo were I used to buy things that sounded loud and looked cool, and it was basically junk. At least that's how I would look at it now. I had a friend at the time who, like when I bought an equalizer with one of the spectrum analyzers that you see in the center there, we used to just joke that there were lights that actually did nothing. And so, what changed for me? Well, I had a friend who had a friend who had an older brother who had a listening room in his house. And I got to go there a few times. And this was a pretty good sized room with four chairs in it and lots and lots and lots of albums and really big amplifiers. But these speakers he had, these Dahlquist DQ10s, were just amazing. He also had Dahlquist DQ1 subwoofers, which were just huge speakers, and it just sounded amazing. I was blown away. This is one of these places where you would go to, and nobody's talking when they're listening to music. You pick an album when it's your turn, and listen to the album side all the way through, and nobody would talk. Um, I kind of started thinking differently about my stereo stuff and just started selling my old speakers and equalizers and things like that to friends who were interested. And I bought these speakers called Magnapans. Magnaplanar speakers have been made in Minnesota for 47 years. A planar speaker is a flat surface that has wires embedded in it and it vibrates like a conventional speaker cone does. Um, Magnapans are what are called dipole speakers. So they play the same out of the front and back. And as such, you typically would set them up a few feet away from the rear wall. And the reflections out of the back of the speaker actually are part of the sound that's coming out of the speaker. So reflections are good in this case, and basically turns your room into a giant speaker. I really like them. I think that they were some of the best sounding speakers I've ever heard. They're just huge. And I had to look for apartments that uh, had a place where I could set these things up. And then along came surround sound and uh, iPods and all that kind of stuff. And my focus changed over the years, and I got into just listening to videos with good surround sound and things like that. But I, I always felt like these things like earbuds and AirPods and Google Homes and things like that. They're just compromises for convenience. But are they actually any good? So when we hear the word stereo, what does it actually mean? The second point that I have up there mentions a phantom channel. So a properly set up set of speakers in a good stereo system, and a room is part of a stereo system. If you have a system that's too echoey, things don't always work correctly. But when you have things set up correctly, a phantom channel should appear between the speakers. If you're sitting at the right distance from the speakers, if the speakers are the right distance apart and angled correctly, the speakers should actually disappear, and instruments and voices and things like that should sound as if they're coming from like floating between the speakers. And so the quality of the speaker is important to reproduce voices and instruments and things like that. But what I'm looking for and what a lot of audiophiles look for is what's called a sound stage. And I was recently at somebody's house who's really into high-end headphones, like really expensive headphones, and we were kind of arguing about this. And he was just saying that a sound stage is, it's not something real. And I beg to differ because I've heard it so many times in really great stereo systems. And the great stereo systems don't have to always be expensive. They just have to be set up correctly, and some care needs to be taken in how you're selecting components and whatnot. But in a properly set up system, you can definitely hear a sound stage. And I've found myself listening to some like orchestral music that when instruments change, like maybe a voice changes to a saxophone and a saxophone changes to a guitar solo, you actually find yourself your head turns and looks in different directions as the music is presented in front of you. A great stereo system is kind of like macro photography. Um, there should be depth, there should be width, and kind of a sense of instrument placement, and that's kind of demonstrated by the visuals I put up there of macro photography with the background out of focus, just meaning that there's depth to well reproduced audio, and you just can't get that out of an Alexa or even good earbuds, and definitely not out of something like an Apple HomePod or something like that. Another really important thing is the material needs to be recorded and produced well. There's been so many times where I've listened to things in my car, or maybe I'm cutting the grass and listening on my earphones, and I take a CD or digital recording to a friend's house and listen to it on good stereo, and I'm just disappointed. It's um, a really good stereo will sometimes reveal that a recording isn't all that great. And what I've found is that some things like classic rock that I'm into, like the Who, I love the Who, I love their music, but I find that a lot of their music is not recorded very well. The experience I was just mentioning before about a friend who's into headphones, he played Stairway to Heaven for me on his best set of headphones, and um, I think he was a little bit disappointed when I wasn't blown away. But although I like Led Zeppelin and I like Stairway to Heaven, there was just a lot of hiss in the background. It just didn't sound good. And like I said, I think he was a little bit disappointed. Um, so over the years, I've seen some really insane designs for speakers and amplifiers and things like that. This is one of my favorite, the MBL speakers. If you look at the middle metal section on the photo on the left, those are interweaved pieces of I think it's titanium, but some kind of light metal, like maybe aluminum, very thin. And unlike a speaker cone, a traditional one that vibrates and pushes air towards you, these play 360 degrees. So like the Magnepans I showed before, which play equally out of the front and back, the MBL speakers radiate in 360 degrees. And they just have an amazing sound. The first time I heard them in a stereo store in Chicago, probably 25 years ago, I was with a friend, and when we walked out of the store, he's a guitar player, and he said, "Oh my God, I could almost have reached out and touched the guitar strings. That's how precise those speakers were. Pretty amazing." Um, I like this stuff. I don't have the kind of disposable income to spend $20,000 on amplifiers, and I know a guy who has a $40,000 turntable. It's pretty insane, but it's fun to listen to if you have that kind of money and space to keep those kind of things. But you don't need to spend that kind of money to get good audio. Um, So there's this guy in the picture here, Steve Guttenberg. He does YouTube videos. He's been doing them for quite a few years. He reviews audio equipment. I would call him an audiophile, a serious audiophile. And he's got a series of videos, like two or three of them, like best picks for like $1,000 system, $1,500 system. The screen grab I did there was for a $2,500. I think he might even go up to like 3,500 or 5,000 or something like that. But he reviews a lot of equipment. He's a little bit of an odd character, but fun to watch, interesting, and he's definitely informed on the topic. I watch him all the time. One of my daughters has a HomePod, an Apple speaker, and to me, I've played with it a lot. It just sounds boomy. It doesn't sound great. And I think it's fine if you're having a party, but I'm not going to sit down and do any critical listening on something like that. Um, I mentioned that you can, for not a lot of money, you can put together a reasonably good system. You don't have to spend $25,000. And the speakers on the top there, ELACs, are fairly renowned for being a really, really, really good speaker that I think they cost like $299. And there's other examples of budget audio stuff that sounds good as well. But care has to be taken in how you place these things. You can't, even though they're called bookshelf speakers, you can't stuff them in a bookshelf and expect that they're going to sound good. And PS Audio, the little amplifier that's shown there, $700, and pairing those speakers with that amplifier will give fantastic sound. Will it have the bass of a large like a tower standing speaker? No, but there's other companies that make budget gear, like Emotiva. The subwoofer that's pictured there is $300, and you don't have to buy these things all at once. Like you could buy a pair of speakers and an amplifier and be happy with that, and then sometime down the road decide that, I think I want a little extra bass. I'm going to add one of these subwoofers, and you can mix and match and interchange things if it's a hobby that you find you're interested in. Um, Over the last few years, I've seen a huge resurgence of vintage audio. The last time I went to an audio show, there were lots and lots and lots of reel-to-reel, um, music being played on reel-to-reels. Nothing I've ever been into, but interesting nonetheless. I have a friend who just bought an old Sansui receiver because his brother had one when he was a teenager, and I think he paid $500 or $600 for it, and then took it to a guy who fixes stereo equipment just to have it checked over. Maybe there were some lights burned out, and I put another couple $100 into it, and now that's what he listens to. And my 9-year-old nephew just got a turntable for Christmas, and he's really into it. He's a David Bowie fan apparently. Um, I haven't really spent too much money on my audio system in years and years. As a matter of fact, I had a flood in my basement around 2007, and it just made a disaster out of where I had my stereo set up. And just other priorities have gotten in the way. Just really haven't been into it. But being at home for the last year has had a great kind of a byproduct for me, and that's that I've started listening to my stereo again. And I just bought a new pair of speakers. What's in the picture there is not my house, but those are a Magnapan speaker, like the ones that I used to have, which were enormous. These are only 4 feet tall. They work the same way. It's a piece of mylar in there with wires embedded in it, and the music plays equally out of the front and back. Um, these speakers are only $650, and I don't actually have them yet. I ordered them about a month ago, and they've got a 4-month lead time for delivery. So I'm really looking forward to getting these. And getting back into this has just reminded me how much I miss just sitting down and listening to a stereo rather than an, an iPod or something like that. So when you listen to music, like we all probably enjoy music, but audiophiles listen to music a little bit differently. They're listening for that imaging and the sound stage and the quality, the fidelity of the music. And some of these things like Mark Knopfler, Dire Straits, anybody who's into classic rock, if you're around the same age as me, you're probably familiar with that. You like it. But there's some things that, like Lord has this song Royals. I've heard that on systems that cost $500,000, and I'm just blown away by the acoustics. And a couple of years ago, one of my friends turned me on to Pentatonics. He had been at, I think he said, a Whole Foods, and this Pentatonics album or CD was at the checkout, and he just picked it up on a whim. And he and I have been listening to it for several years now, and it's just amazing. You can see Pentatonics on YouTube. They've got some good recordings, including a redo of Simon Garfunkel's "Sound of Silence." It's pretty good. And the last one I mentioned there, Chris Jones, this song "No Sanctuary Here" just has some great acoustics. And I think I've had people tell me sometimes like, "Oh, that's system sounds great, but it doesn't have any bass." And what I found is that lots of systems out there play exaggerated bass. Like we think we want to hear this really boomy music, but a lot of music doesn't really actually have music that booms like that. It's kind of the example I gave with the Apple HomePod. Um, it's got an exaggerated boomy bass that I don't particularly like, but with like Lord, that song Royals has some really great bass in there, and the Chris Jones has some great bass in it as well. So, where can you see things like this if you don't have $50,000 to spend on a stereo? Well, when I was younger, I used to spend a lot of times with my friends going to stereo stores and looking at these things. And um, in Chicago, we're actually home to something called the Audio Expo North America. It was canceled last year because of COVID, canceled again this year because of COVID. I assume it's going to come back at some point, but Axpona um, is they um, uh, they clean out a hotel like a 10-story hotel and maybe take 5 or 6 floors of the hotel and empty out the rooms and put these high-end stereos. People who sell speakers sell amplifiers, wires, albums, associated things like amplifiers and things like that. And you get to go there and listen to it for like $40 for a day. Um, and I made a video of that a few years ago. And if any of this is interesting to you, shoot me an email and I'll send you a link to my video. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Oh, so cool.